tide rolling quietly to shore. Tonight, we're going somewhere dark. Not frightening, but hushed. Ancient. A world that begins just below the waves and stretches into the deepest places on Earth. Places more mysterious than the surface of the moon. Tonight we're diving into the deep sea. Or rather, wondering why, after all our progress, so much of it remains untouched. It's strange, isn't it? We launch telescopes into the cosmos, land rovers on distant planets, map the galaxies. But when it comes to the ocean just beyond our toes, most of it is still a secret. Vast, uncharted, and almost dreamlike in its remoteness. So I wonder, where are you listening from tonight? And how far are you from the nearest coastline? A few miles? 1,000? Funny, isn't it? The sea is everywhere, and yet the deep is nowhere we ever go. If this gentle drift through wonder helps you rest, if it calms your mind or gives your thoughts something soft to hold, I'd be ever so grateful if you'd like the video or subscribe to this sleepy little corner of science. It helps others find their way here too, to rest, to learn, or just to float for a while. Now, I do hope this journey doesn't stir up so much curiosity that it keeps you wide awake. But if it does, well, you'll be in good company, with anglerfish, ancient currents, and submarines that hum like lullabies beneath the waves. So settle in, let your shoulders soften, take a long, slow breath, and let's begin. Because somewhere between the sunlit shallows and the trenches that swallow mountains lies the quiet story of why, even now, the deep sea remains unknown. Have you ever stood at the edge of the sea and felt small? Not in a bad way, not like shrinking under pressure, but in that expansive, almost enchanted way. The kind of small that makes you feel part of something much larger. The horizon blurs, the water shifts in silent conversation with the moon, and beneath those soft surface ripples, an entire world keeps breathing, unseen. There's something about the deep sea that stirs a very particular kind of wonder. Not quite fear, not quite awe, something older, primal. It's the sort of quiet that makes your mind lean in and whisper, what else is down there? We talk about space as the final frontier, but the deep ocean doesn't feel futuristic. It feels forgotten. It's not out of reach because it's far away. It's out of reach because it's right here and still unknown. That contradiction, close yet alien, gives it a dreamlike pull. Like remembering a place you've never actually been. And when we think of the deep sea, we don't picture maps or measurements. We picture feelings. A dark, endless expanse. Flickers of bioluminescence blinking like stars trapped beneath miles of water. The lonely call of a whale echoing through liquid dusk. A sense of pressure, stillness, secrets kept. For many, the deep sea lives not in facts, but in fables. Monsters with glowing teeth, ghost ships drifting without crew, lost cities in glass domes of coral. Even today, when we hear the words unexplored ocean, our minds don't immediately reach for sonar or robotics. We reach for myth, leviathans, abysses, forgotten things. Isn't it odd how a part of our own planet can feel so completely untethered from daily life? We wake up, scroll through news from across the globe, track hurricanes from satellites, watch footage of Mars in 4K, and yet if you ask someone what's at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the answer might be, I don't know, something strange. And that strange feeling isn't just about distance, it's about perception. We tend to measure places by their accessibility, by how easily we can categorize them, imagine them, picture ourselves inside them. A bustling city, you can smell the pavement. A mountain trail, you can feel the crunch of boots on stone. Even space, for all its silence, is painted in sleek spacecraft, starlight, and the echo of radio signals. But the deep sea? The real deep? That's harder. Try to visualize it, not the coral reefs or the kelp forests. But the Hadal zone, the pitch-black, freezing, high-pressure expanse beneath 6,000 meters, there's no light, no sound, just the weight of water crushing down with the force of skyscrapers. Our senses fail us. There are no familiar cues, no solid ground to mentally stand on. And in that emptiness, our imagination fills the void. In psychology, there's a term called the uncanny valley, that eerie feeling when something is almost human, but not quite. It's the discomfort of recognition without certainty. The deep sea seems to occupy its own kind of uncanny space, familiar in theory, but deeply disorienting in experience. It's Earth, but sideways. And then there's the silence. We often think of silence as peaceful, but the silence of the deep is different. It's not quiet like a bedroom at night. It's quiet like a cathedral carved from pressure and ancient salt. It's a silence so complete it bends inward, as if the ocean itself is holding its breath. That hush creates a psychological distance, the kind that makes you hesitate, not from fear, but from reverence. That distance isn't just emotional, it's physical too. We're land dwellers. We breathe air, navigate by light, live in three-dimensional spaces that we can see and touch. The deep ocean defies all of that. It's not just hostile to human life, it's incompatible. If you were to sink to the average depth of the ocean without protection, you'd be crushed long before you hit bottom. Light disappears within the first few hundred meters. Sound behaves differently. Gravity still pulls, but orientation dissolves. Up and down become ideas, not directions. And this incompatibility breeds avoidance. Our brains, in their gentle stubbornness, prefer to focus on what they can grasp. The deep sea? It slips away, not just from view, but from comprehension. It's hard to fear something you can't define, and harder still to feel ownership of something you can't inhabit. That's why, perhaps, we often speak of the ocean in halves. The one we know, surface waters, fishing boats, sunsets on the waves, and the one we don't. The shallow is our playground. The deep is another world entirely. Still, we dream about it. We dream about what might be living down there, about creatures that evolved in isolation, untouched by sun or storm. We imagine ecosystems that glow, that drift, that wait in the slow pulse of geological time. We speculate about shipwrecks carrying ancient cargo, about vents that breathe minerals like breath, about tectonic scars and sunken plains that tell stories no one has heard in 100 million years. Because for all its darkness, the deep sea isn't empty. It's teeming. We just can't see it. Yet. And maybe that's the most tantalizing part of all. The idea that the unknown still exists. That in a world where nearly everything feels mapped, measured, reviewed and posted, there are still places that resist being pinned down. The deep ocean keeps its secrets not out of malice, but out of silence. And in a strange way, that silence feels generous, as if it's waiting, as if it's saying, when you're ready, I'll be here. We sometimes think of exploration as a conquest, flags, footprints, frontiers crossed, but the deep sea doesn't yield to that kind of ambition. It doesn't resist, it doesn't welcome, it just is. Vast, cold, patient, waiting for us to slow down enough to listen. And there's something comforting about that. In a world that moves faster every day, the deep sea is timeless. Not in a magical way, but in a geological, ancient way. It doesn't care about our schedules. It doesn't rush. It has been here longer than our languages, our maps, our myths, and it will likely remain long after we're gone. So when you think about why we haven't explored it, consider this. Maybe the sea isn't holding back. Maybe we are. And not out of laziness or oversight, but because the mind, like the body, has its depths. And some depths aren't crossed quickly. They must be drifted into, gradually, respectfully, with wide eyes and quiet hearts. So next time you're near the sea, maybe at the shore, or even just hearing a recording of waves, pause, not for what's visible, but for what isn't. Not for what you can name, but for what you can almost feel. That gentle pull beneath the surface, that mystery you can't quite define. That's the deep sea. Not just water, not just pressure, but the part of our world that reminds us. Discovery isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers, and maybe that's why it remains unexplored. Long before sonar scans and titanium submersibles, before the words deep sea ever floated through a lecture hall, humans looked out over the ocean and imagined. We didn't just wonder what was out there, we storied it. The sea, especially the unseen part beneath it, wasn't considered empty. It was full, sometimes benevolent, often dangerous, always sacred. And in nearly every ancient culture, the deeper you went, the stranger and more powerful things became. In the myths of Mesopotamia, the ocean was Tiamat, a vast primordial goddess of salt water and chaos. She wasn't just the sea, she was the raw matter of creation. Her body, after a divine battle, was said to have been split to form the sky and the earth. The deep wasn't just where life began, it was life before it knew what form to take. The Greeks had their own abyss. The deep ocean was the domain of Oceanus, an ancient river encircling the world, and later of Poseidon. Unpredictable, violent, commanding. Sailors told stories not only of storms but of creatures that pulled ships down. There were sirens, of course, but also whirlpools that seemed alive, krakens that surfaced from nowhere, and gods whose moods could drown cities. The Norse told tales of Jörmungandr, the world's serpent, so massive it encircled the earth and grasped its own tail. It lived beneath the sea, coiled in shadow. Its stirring would bring about the end of the world. To imagine the deep in their cosmology was to imagine time folded, waiting to snap. In Polynesian traditions, the sea was a relative, an ancestor. The stories often involve voyaging and discovery, yes, but also reverence. The ocean was not to be explored as much as consulted, respected, sung to. And within its depths lived spirits, some playful, others fierce, but none indifferent. Indigenous Australian peoples tell of the rainbow serpent, not always oceanic, but deeply tied to water, to flow, to creation. Its movement shaped landscapes. In some versions of the story, the waters it dwells in are far below, subterranean, submerged, sacred. And in Japan, tales of umibozu, sea monks, told of ghostly figures that would appear on calm seas, capsize ships without warning, and vanish into the fog. These stories weren't told to explain specific sightings. They were reminders. The ocean listens. The deep, especially, remembers. In all these myths, the deep sea is more than a setting. It's a force. And almost always it is layered with meaning. The unconscious, the past, the divine, the dangerous, the origin of all things. It was not understood, but it was felt. Profoundly. Even in more recent centuries, as human societies became more scientifically curious, the stories never fully disappeared. Instead, they transformed. In the Middle Ages, maps labelled the edge of the known seas with, "Here be dragons." Cartographers filled blank spaces with tentacled beasts, or great whales that could swallow entire vessels. This wasn't just creative flair, it was a placeholder for anxiety. Where knowledge stopped, imagination surged forward. Some thought the ocean simply dropped off. Others imagined underwater continents, Atlantis being the most famous, populated with advanced civilizations that slipped beneath the waves in punishment or pride. By the 19th century, as the age of sail gave way to the age of steam, the mysteries of the ocean seemed more tantalizing than ever. Jules Verne wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in 1870, a work of fiction, yes, but one that reflected a very real obsession. What lies beneath? His submarine, the Nautilus, was powered by futuristic technology, yes, but what made the story so magnetic was the world it travelled through. Glowing jellyfish, sunken cities, deep trenches and crushing darkness. The sea was not just backdrop, it was a character, indifferent, enigmatic, beautiful. And while science began taking its first tentative steps toward real exploration, the cultural metaphors never stopped. The deep ocean became a mirror for the mind, especially the unconscious. Freud, in the early 20th century, likened the psyche to an iceberg. What is visible is small. What lies beneath? Vast. Later psychologists adopted the metaphor too. The ocean became our inner self, hidden, murky, slow-moving. Poets followed suit. T.S. Eliot, Sylvia Plath, and Pablo Neruda all wrote of the sea as both metaphor and mystery, something eternal, something inside us. The deep wasn't just a location, it was a feeling. And music. Oh, music has always known the sea. Sea shanties gave rhythm to labour, yes, but they also carried warnings. Folk songs told of lovers lost to the waves. Ballads described sailors driven mad by the endless flat horizon. Even lullabies, quiet songs for sleep, often carry ocean imagery, waves, depth, the sense of being rocked by something older than memory. But here's the interesting thing. As our science improved, as our instruments grew more precise, our metaphors didn't vanish. They just shifted. Today, when we talk about depth, we still mean more than distance. We speak of deep truths, deep thoughts, deep emotions. The ocean has imprinted itself on our language. Unfathomable, a word now used for the complex or the surreal, literally comes from how many arms lengths of rope it takes to reach the sea floor. Plumbing the depths doesn't mean sinking a vessel. It means searching the soul. And when we say something is oceanic, we don't just mean vast. We mean it overwhelms us with beauty, with fear, with meaning. That's the legacy of the deep sea in human history, not just as a physical place, but as a canvas for wonder. And that matters, because how we feel about a place influences how we approach it. We didn't explore the ocean the same way we did the land. We revered it, we feared it, we sang to it. And even now, with all our tools and training and technology, that reverence lingers. It's why the deep sea remains one of the last places on Earth where mystery is allowed to live. Consider this. When we send a robot to Mars, we call it a rover. It explores, it scouts, it sends back data. But when we send a probe to the bottom of the ocean, we often call it a descent. Same goal, different emotion. Down there we descend. As if into ourselves. Our ancestors may not have had pressure gauges or deep-sea cameras, but they had something else, a kind of spiritual sonar. They sensed what modern science would confirm, that the ocean's depths are not empty. They are unreached. And in that reaching we've always brought more than gear. We bring myth, memory, longing. Even now, in our so-called age of certainty, we dream of Atlantis. We build entire ecosystems in video games around submerged cities. We write films about sea creatures rising. We fill novels with submarines searching for relics and ruins. We turn our aquariums into quiet temples where people stand in front of dark blue glass and stare. Not at fish, really, but at the feeling the deep awakens. And isn't that something? That despite centuries of science, we still stand where our ancestors stood, at the edge of the sea, wondering, still whispering stories into the dark, still listening for answers in the hush between waves. It's easy to say the deep sea remains unexplored because it's difficult to reach, because of technology, because of funding, because of logistics. But maybe, just maybe, it's also because part of us doesn't want to map it entirely. Maybe we need places that remain mythic, not because we fear them, but because we love them in a way that logic alone cannot contain. Because what is the deep ocean, if not the original story? The first frontier, the last sacred space that refuses to be fully tamed. We've looked to the sky and found mathematics. We've looked to the atom and found uncertainty. But when we look into the ocean, we find ourselves, our past, our fears, our dreams, and for all our progress, maybe that's something we're not quite ready to let go of. Not yet. Let's drift now from myth into method, from imagination into investigation. Because while the deep sea may stir stories in the soul, it also presents very real challenges to the body, the machine, and the mind. First, we need to understand what we're actually talking about when we say deep sea. The ocean isn't one vast, undifferentiated space. It's layered. Like a slow descent into nightfall, each level grows stranger, darker, and more removed from the world we know. At the top there's the epipelagic zone, the sunlit layer, where light still dances and photosynthesis keeps ecosystems buzzing. This is where we swim, fish, sail, and dream. Below that, from about 200 to 1,000 meters, lies the mesopelagic zone, the twilight zone. Sunlight fades, temperatures drop. Many fish here have large, sensitive eyes. Some flash with bioluminescence, soft pulses of blue and green like fireflies drifting through a storm. Then comes the bathypelagic zone, or midnight zone, 1,000 to 4,000 meters deep. No sunlight reaches here, it's cold, nearly freezing. Pressure builds to over 5,500 pounds per square inch. That's like stacking an elephant on every square inch of your skin. Life here moves slowly. Creatures drift in the darkness, adapted not for speed, but for survival. And still, we go deeper. The abyssopelagic zone spans from 4,000 to 6,000 meters. Here, temperatures hover near freezing. Food is scarce. Many animals live off marine snow, a constant drift of dead plankton, fish scales, fecal pellets, and decaying matter falling from above. It's a quiet feast, slow and steady, like dust settling in a forgotten attic. Below even this lies the Hadal zone, the trenches. These are the deepest parts of the ocean, found in narrow, steep valleys formed by tectonic activity. They plunge to depths of 11,000 meters or more, deeper than Mount Everest is tall, and we have explored less than 1% of them. It's here, in the Hadal zone, that the ocean becomes almost mythic again. Not because it's supernatural, but because the difficulty of reaching it makes every observation feel miraculous. So why haven't we explored it more? Let's start with the most obvious answer: pressure. At sea level, we live under 1 atmosphere of pressure, the weight of the air above us. But for every 10 meters you descend underwater, that pressure increases by another atmosphere. By the time you reach 1,000 meters, still well above the abyss, the pressure is 100 times greater than at the surface. It's not just uncomfortable, it's lethal. The human body is simply not built for those conditions. Our lungs would collapse, our tissues would compress, our senses would fail. And so, we build machines. But pressure doesn't just affect people, it crushes steel, deforms glass, short-circuits electronics. Designing vehicles that can survive, let alone function, in the deep sea is a feat of extraordinary engineering. Take the DSV Alvin, one of the most famous deep-sea submersibles. It's been in service since the 1960s, operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Alvin can dive to about 4,500 meters. It has carried scientists to hydrothermal vents, discovered new species, and even explored the wreck of the Titanic. But its passenger sphere, where the scientists sit, is just big enough for 3 people. Its titanium walls are nearly 7 inches thick, and it takes hours to descend and return, all for just a few precious hours of observation at depth. Only a handful of vessels on Earth can go deeper. The Trieste in 1960 carried Jacques Picard and Don Walsh to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, a journey that took nearly 5 hours down, 20 minutes on the seafloor, and 3 hours back up. The Deep-Sea Challenger, piloted by James Cameron in 2012, made a solo dive to the same trench with more modern instrumentation. And then there's the limiting factor, a relatively recent vehicle designed to repeatedly explore the deepest parts of the ocean, It's small, expensive, remarkable. But here's the thing, all of these are exceptions. Most oceanographic research doesn't involve people in submersibles. It uses remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs. Machines controlled from ships or pre-programmed to roam and return. Still, even these have limitations. Cameras and sensors must be pressure resistant. Communication through water is slow and unreliable. Radio waves barely travel, so we rely on sound waves and tethers. Battery life is finite. Currents can push machines off course, and the ocean, vast as it is, rarely cooperates with neat paths. It's like trying to explore a pitch-black cave system with a flickering flashlight while wearing gloves inside a diving bell, and doing it all by remote control. But pressure isn't the only barrier. There's also temperature. Most of the deep ocean hovers just above freezing, around 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. Electronics must be insulated, materials become brittle, oil thickens, batteries drain more quickly. Even simple tasks, like keeping a robotic arm flexible, become major engineering puzzles. Then there's darkness. Sunlight fades completely after about 1,000 meters. Below that there is no day or night, only shadow. Cameras require artificial light, but artificial light scares away many organisms. If you want to observe behavior naturally, you need infrared cameras, red light filters, or total patience. And patience comes at a cost. A single deep-sea expedition, renting a ship, operating a submersible, hiring crew and scientists, can cost millions of dollars. And unlike space missions which benefit from massive international investment, ocean research is often underfunded, overlooked, or split between dozens of smaller institutions. The result? We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the seafloor of our own planet. That's not poetic exaggeration. Mars has been mapped in high resolution, down to meters in detail. The deep ocean? Only about 25% of the ocean floor has been mapped using modern sonar. The rest is vague, broad outlines gathered from satellite altimetry, which measures sea level to infer what's beneath. It's like guessing the shape of furniture in a room based on how the carpet rises and falls. And while satellite data is invaluable, it can't replace in situ exploration. You can't study ecosystems, collect samples, or observe behavior from orbit. Which brings us to another point: visibility. In the deep sea, visibility isn't just low. It's a paradox. You need light to see, but light changes behavior. Many deep-sea creatures are adapted to total darkness. They don't have eyes, or they do, but they're sensitive to tiny flashes of bioluminescence, not the harsh glare of halogen lamps. Imagine you're trying to observe deer in a forest, but every time you look, you shine a spotlight in their eyes. You wouldn't see much, not as it truly is. The deep is similar. The more you try to illuminate it, the more it hides. Some researchers have turned to stealth methods, red light imaging, passive acoustics, soft glow LED sensors, to reduce disturbance. Others build landers, small platforms dropped from ships that settle on the seafloor and film whatever passes by. These tools are improving, but the pace is slow, and the ocean, vast as it is, demands both scale and subtlety. And then there's the final challenge, one that is rarely mentioned in headlines, but perhaps matters most: time. The ocean is in constant motion. Tides rise and fall, currents shift, nutrient plumes drift for days before dispersing. Events happen slowly or suddenly, but either way they're easy to miss. To truly understand the deep sea, we can't just drop in and take a snapshot, we have to stay. But staying, stationing instruments, maintaining equipment, monitoring long-term patterns is incredibly difficult. Salt corrodes, batteries fail, cables snap, algae grow, animals tamper, and still the sea moves. So most of what we know comes from brief visits, glimpses, hours-long descents that capture only what happens in front of a camera on a specific day in a specific place, and in between, silence. But the sea keeps going, with or without us. And still, despite the barriers, pressure, cold, cost, time, we return. Why? Because every time we do, the ocean answers with something we didn't expect. A new species, a stranger behaviour, an entire ecosystem that rewrites what we thought life could be. One of the most dramatic examples came in the late 1970s near the Galapagos Rift. Scientists using Alvin discovered something entirely unpredicted: hydrothermal vents, chimneys of mineral-rich water gushing up from beneath the Earth's crust at temperatures over 350 degrees Celsius. Surrounding these vents, life, not drifting down from the surface, not surviving on the trickle of dead plankton, but thriving, entirely independent of sunlight. These creatures, giant tube worms, blind shrimps, sulfur-eating bacteria, lived in a world lit not by photons but by chemistry. The implications were enormous. Until then, we believed all ecosystems on Earth ultimately depended on the sun. Here was proof they didn't have to, and if life could thrive in total darkness, in crushing pressure, feeding off volcanic gases, then maybe, just maybe, it could exist in other extreme environments too, on Europa beneath its icy crust, on Enceladus in its subsurface seas, even in the ancient oceans of Mars long since frozen. Suddenly the deep sea wasn't just about Earth anymore. It became a model, a metaphor, a proving ground for what life might look like elsewhere. And yet we've barely begun to catalogue it. Each time we descend, we find species we've never seen before. Not one or two, dozens, sometimes hundreds. Pale, slow-moving animals with delicate forms and bizarre anatomies. Fish with transparent skin, squid with elbows, jellyfish that shimmer and fold like galaxies. We name them sometimes, photograph them, collect a few samples, but mostly we marvel, and then we ascend carrying only a tiny piece of what the ocean showed us. We think of exploration as conquest, of taking, of claiming, of completing, but the deep sea resists that. It gives nothing easily, and what it does offer feels less like a prize and more like a gift. Still, not all surprises are gentle. In recent years, the deep sea has become the subject of growing industrial interest. Companies and nations have begun looking toward deep-sea mining, harvesting the mineral-rich nodules and crusts that coat parts of the seafloor. Cobalt, manganese, rare earth metals, all essential for electronics, batteries, renewable energy. It's tempting. The ocean floor contains vast, untapped resources, and compared to terrestrial mining, it promises no human displacement, no surface scarring, no visible harm. But the deep is not empty. Its ecosystems are slow to grow, slow to recover. Many species live only in specific locations, a single ridge, a single vent, a single depth range. Disturb that, and you risk erasing life that took millions of years to evolve, life we may not even know exists. And recovery, if it happens at all, might take centuries. That's the dilemma of modern ocean science. We want to learn, to protect, to preserve, but we also want to use, and the line between curiosity and consumption is thinner than we'd like to admit. So scientists race to study what's down there, to understand it, to argue for caution, because in many ways this is our last chance to explore the deep sea before we change it forever. And yet, the deep doesn't hurry. It continues at its own pace, layered in silt, pulsing in currents, echoing in whale song and tectonic tremor. And we, these land-dwelling, air-breathing creatures, we keep building better tools, smarter drones, more sensitive sensors, underwater observatories that can rest on the seafloor for months, even years, cameras that can see without startling, ROVs that can glide instead of crash. We're not just descending anymore, we're listening. There's even a growing movement called deep-sea stewardship. Scientists, ethicists and explorers working together to establish frameworks for how we interact with the ocean's depths. It's not just about exploration now, it's about responsibility, because the deep sea isn't waiting to be conquered. It's not a frontier, It's not a resource, it's a realm. And like any ancient place, it deserves reverence. We're beginning to understand that. Slowly. There are initiatives now to map the entire seafloor by 2030, part of the Seabed 2030 project, an international collaboration aiming to combine sonar data, public charts, and new expeditions into a global, high-resolution map of the ocean floor. Not just for curiosity, but for safety, understanding tsunami risk, submarine cables, climate modelling, fish migration, conservation, but also for wonder. Because mapping is just the start. The ocean doesn't yield its secrets to GPS. You can draw the trench, but to know it you must go. And that's the most beautiful and difficult part of all this. That every piece of the ocean we explore reveals another layer we haven't. That each descent is both an answer and a question. That the closer we get to understanding, the more mystery blooms. The deep sea remains unexplored, not because we are careless, but because the scale of the unknown is simply that great. Because the barriers are not only physical, but philosophical. What does it mean to explore something you cannot see? To measure something that shifts beneath your tools? To respect something you may never fully understand? These aren't technical questions, they're human ones. And as our machines grow stronger, able to dive deeper, stay longer, see more clearly, it becomes not just a test of engineering, but of character. What kind of explorers will we be? Will we rush, extract, flatten the unknown into the familiar? Or will we pause, float, wait, listen? Because the ocean doesn't mind our curiosity. It's vast enough to hold it, but it asks for humility. And maybe, in return, it offers something even greater than knowledge. It offers awe. If the ocean were a story, the deep sea would be its most haunting chapter, not a climax, not a conclusion, but that long, silent pause in the middle, where the plot slows, the light dims, and the reader leans in to catch a whisper of something vast. By this point, we've mapped out the barriers, the crushing pressure, the constant cold, the invisible darkness. But those are just the boundaries. Within them lies a whole other planet, not in some distant solar system. Right here, just beneath our feet, or more accurately beneath our boats, exists a biosphere that challenges nearly everything we thought we knew about life. Let's begin with mechanism, how life functions in such extremes. At the surface, sunlight is the engine. Plants take in photons, convert them to sugars, and pass energy along the food chain. But in the deep, where sunlight never reaches, that model falls apart, and yet life goes on. It turns out not all life needs the sun. In the 1970s, scientists discovered chemosynthesis, a process by which microbes convert chemicals from Earth's interior, like hydrogen sulfide, into energy. These microbes form the base of an entirely different food web, one that exists not because of sunlight, but in spite of its absence. These microbes gather around hydrothermal vents, cracks in the seafloor where superheated water, rich in minerals, gushes up from the Earth's mantle. Around these vents thrive ecosystems so alien that at first scientists didn't know what to make of them. Imagine towering chimney-like structures, called black smokers, spewing dark plumes of mineral-laden water, and clustered around them, dense fields of giant tube worms, some up to 8 feet tall, with no mouths or stomachs. Instead, they host symbiotic bacteria inside their tissues, which produce food from the vent chemicals. Nearby, pale crabs with hairy pincers, blind shrimp with heat-sensing organs, fish that glide through currents of heat and cold in a kind of silent ballet. There's no sunlight, no photosynthesis, and yet life thrives. This is not an exception. This is a parallel reality, one we almost missed entirely. These vent ecosystems don't just rewrite biology textbooks, they reframe our understanding of where life can exist, and possibly where it began. Some scientists believe early Earth may have hosted its first life around hydrothermal vents. Here,